Maria had always believed that love was built on sacrifice. All her life, she had known only one kind of love, the kind that gave without expecting anything in return. From the time she lost her husband, she poured every ounce of her being into her only son, Daniel. He was her pride, her reason to wake up each morning, and the silent proof that her life still had meaning. She worked in a small school as an assistant teacher, her hands often tired, her heart often heavy, but her eyes always bright when she spoke of Daniel. Every salary she earned, every little saving she tucked away, every decision she made, everything was for him. When Daniel grew older and got married to a young woman named Lily, Maria thought her years of struggle had finally found a home in his happiness. The day they moved into their small rented apartment, Maria stood by the window and whispered a prayer of gratitude. Months passed, and Daniel would often visit her, talking about his job and how he wanted to buy a house of his own. Maria's heart swelled with pride. One evening, as they sat together over dinner, Daniel said softly, "Mom, I found a house. It's perfect for us, but I don't have enough for the down payment." The word "us" made her smile. It meant she was included. Without hesitation, Maria unlocked the small wooden box she had guarded for years. Inside was her life savings, money she had planned to keep for her old age. She didn't think twice. With trembling hands, she handed the envelope to her son. "For you, my love," she said. "Our home." Daniel's eyes softened as he hugged her, whispering promises of a room just for her, a place where she'd always belong. The purchase was made within weeks. The house was lovely, small but warm, with sunlight spilling across the kitchen tiles. Maria helped them move in, arranging the furniture, scrubbing the floors, hanging curtains with a smile that came from her soul. It felt like building a dream brick by brick. She imagined herself there, cooking for her son, tending to the little garden, hearing laughter fill the room she helped create. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Daniel was happy. Lily smiled, and Maria's heart finally rested. But slowly, small cracks began to show, tiny, invisible things that only a mother could notice. Lily grew distant, often closing the door when Maria visited. Daniel, too, became busier, his phone calls shorter, his visits rarer. Still, Maria didn't question anything. She thought maybe it was just the rhythm of married life. One Sunday afternoon, she decided to visit them unannounced, carrying her son's favorite pie. The door opened slowly, and for a moment, she saw confusion in Lily's eyes before she masked it with a polite smile. "Oh, Maria," Lily said, "you should have called first." The word stung like a small thorn, but Maria brushed it off. She entered, placed the pie on the counter, and felt a strange chill settle in the air. Daniel appeared moments later, his expression unreadable. They talked, laughed a little, but the warmth was missing, like sunlight behind thick clouds. When she left, she caught Lily's voice faintly behind the door. "She can't keep coming like this, Daniel. We need space." That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the words over and over. We need space. The house she had paid for suddenly felt like a wall between them. Still, she convinced herself it was nothing. Maybe she was being sensitive. Maybe she was imagining things. But deep down, something in her began to tremble, a fear too painful to name. She told herself that love couldn't disappear so easily, that Daniel would never let her feel unwanted. After all, she had given him everything she had, her money, her time, her youth, her entire life. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between Maria and Daniel grew heavier than words could fill. She tried calling him several times, but his voice always sounded distant, hurried, like a man standing in two worlds but belonging to neither. "I'm just busy, Mom," he would say. "We're trying to settle some things." The we that once made her feel included now made her feel excluded, like a reminder that she was no longer part of his world. Yet Maria never complained. Mothers, she believed, did not measure love in how much they received. They measured it in how much they could still give, even when the giving left them empty. One morning, as she sat in her small apartment, sipping tea gone cold, her neighbor, Mrs. Turner, dropped by with her usual gossip-filled chatter. Between the stories of neighborhood weddings and shop sales, Mrs. Turner mentioned casually, "I saw Daniel and Lily yesterday. They looked so happy." That new car of theirs must have cost a fortune. Maria blinked. A new car, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. The thought tightened something inside her chest. Daniel had told her they were struggling to pay bills, that things were tight. So how had he managed to buy a car? That night, she called him, trying to keep her voice steady. Daniel, she said, I heard you bought a car. That's wonderful. There was a pause, long enough for truth to hide. Then he replied, Oh yes, it was Lily's idea. She said we needed it. His tone was clipped, guarded, and before she could say anything else, he ended the call, saying he'd call her later. For the first time, Maria felt the ache of doubt. It was not about the money, not even about the house. It was about the growing distance, the invisible wall rising between her and the son she once carried in her arms. Nights became lonelier, and her apartment felt colder. She tried to distract herself with her work, with the laughter of children at the school, but whenever she saw a boy hugging his mother, her eyes would sting. She missed Daniel's laughter, his careless jokes, his way of resting his head on her shoulder as a boy. Now that space was filled with silence. A few weeks later, Daniel finally came to visit, but something about him had changed. He looked restless, uneasy, as if every word he spoke was rehearsed. Mom, he began, sitting across from her, Lily and I have been talking. We think it's better if you don't visit too often. She's been feeling uncomfortable. Maria felt her breath catch. Uncomfortable, she repeated. Daniel, I only come once a week. I bring food, I clean a little, he interrupted softly, avoiding her eyes. I know, Mom, but she wants her own space. She says it's hard to feel at home when someone else is always around. His words fell like stones, breaking something deep inside her. She nodded, her throat burning. Of course, she whispered. I understand. That night, Maria cried for the first time in years. It was not the loud kind of crying, the kind that demanded to be heard. It was the quiet, suffocating kind that came from deep inside, the kind that no one saw and no one comforted. She thought of the years she had spent working late, sewing at night to buy him books, skipping meals so he could eat, saving every rupee for his future. All of it, she thought, had led her here, to this moment where she was treated like a stranger in her own child's life. She pressed her hand to her chest, as if trying to hold her heart together. But Maria was not a woman who gave up easily. She told herself that maybe it was just a phase, that young people often needed space. He will come around, she whispered to herself as she folded Daniel's old shirts, still neatly kept in her cupboard. She lit a candle that night and prayed, not for herself, but for him, for his peace, his happiness, even if it meant her loneliness. But somewhere deep inside, another prayer slipped out, a prayer for strength, for the courage to survive whatever truth was waiting for her. Weeks turned into months, and Maria slowly adjusted to the emptiness that had crept into her days. She stopped calling Daniel as often, telling herself that silence was better than rejection. Still, every time the phone rang, her heart leapt with hope, only to fall again when it wasn't him. The little apartment that once felt temporary now became her whole world. She spent her evenings knitting, her eyes glancing again and again at the framed photo of Daniel and Lily smiling on their wedding day. She told herself it was enough to love him from afar, to wish him happiness even when her heart ached. But loneliness has a way of whispering truths you try not to hear. One afternoon, while cleaning her old drawers, Maria found the house documents she had carefully kept since the day she gave Daniel the money. She smiled faintly, tracing her fingers over the paper. It was not about the property. It was a symbol of love, of her dream to see her son secure. But something made her pause. She noticed the ownership details had never included her name. She remembered Daniel saying, "Don't worry, Mom. It's just a formality. It's our home." At that time, she had trusted him completely. But now, the word "our" felt like a lie whispered in kindness. The thought pricked her like a splinter she couldn't remove. The next week, Maria decided to visit the house one last time. It was a quiet Sunday, and the afternoon sun hung low in the sky. She baked Daniel's favorite cake, the same recipe she had made every birthday since he was a boy. Carrying it in a small box, she walked to the bus stop, her heart pounding not from the journey, but from the weight of uncertainty. When she reached the house, she noticed the garden looked different. well-kept but unfamiliar. The flowers she had planted were gone, replaced by decorative stones. The curtains were new, and even the doorbell had changed. She rang the bell, waiting with a hopeful smile. Lily opened the door. Her expression froze for a moment before she forced a smile. "Oh, Maria, what brings you here?" she asked, her tone polite but cold. "I just came to see you both," Maria replied softly, holding out the cake. "It's Daniel's favorite." Before Lily could answer, Daniel appeared behind her, his face tight. "Mom, you should have called," he said, his voice low but firm. "We were just about to go out." The words hit her like a gust of cold wind. I just wanted to see you," she whispered. Lily stepped aside slightly, but her body blocked the doorway. "We really can't, Maria," she said. "We have plans." Maria nodded slowly, the silence between them louder than words. "I understand," she murmured. She placed the cake on the porch step. "At least take this," she said softly, her voice trembling. Daniel didn't look her in the eye. He just nodded once and closed the door gently, leaving her standing there, staring at the wooden frame that now separated her from everything she had ever loved. For a moment, she didn't move. The wind rustled through the garden she had once tended, carrying the faint scent of lilies she hadn't planted. And then, without tears or anger, she turned and walked away. That night, back in her apartment, Maria sat in silence. She didn't eat. She didn't cry. She simply sat by the window, watching the city lights blur into the distance. She realized, with a heavy calm, that she had lost her home, not the house she paid for, but the space she had once occupied in her son's heart. The next morning, she decided to visit the lawyer who had helped with the documents years ago. It took all her courage to ask, but she needed to know. The lawyer looked through the records and sighed. "The property is in Daniel's name alone," he said. "Legally, it's his. There's nothing you can claim unless he decides otherwise." Maria thanked him quietly and left. As she walked back through the crowded streets, the noise around her faded into a dull hum. She wasn't angry. She was hollow. It wasn't about the money or the house. It was about trust, about the kind of betrayal that breaks something deeper than bones. That night, she looked at the family photo on her table and whispered, "I hope you're happy, Daniel." And then, for the first time, she allowed herself to cry, not as a mother losing her son, but as a woman finally facing the truth she had been running from. In the weeks that followed, Maria began to move through her days like a ghost, quiet and unnoticed, yet still breathing. The ache inside her chest didn't disappear. It simply became part of her. Each morning, she woke up, made herself tea, and sat by the same window where sunlight used to feel warm. Now it only reminded her of the house she could no longer enter. But grief, like everything else, has its seasons. One morning, as she walked to the market, she stopped by a small park where children were playing. Their laughter echoed through the air, bright and alive. She sat on a bench, closing her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, she saw a little girl trying to fly a kite but struggling against the wind. Maria smiled softly and helped her untangle the string. "You have to feel the wind, not fight it," she said gently. The girl's face lit up, and soon the kite soared. For the first time in months, Maria felt something light inside her chest, something like peace. After that day, she began spending more time in the park. She started bringing breadcrumbs for the birds, small candies for the children, and stories for anyone who wanted to listen. The mothers in the neighborhood began to greet her warmly. "You remind me of my mother," one of them said, and Maria smiled, though her heart tightened at the words. She never spoke about Daniel or the house. That pain was hers alone, a wound she had decided to carry quietly. But slowly, something inside her began to heal. She realized that while she had lost the love she gave to her son, there were still pieces of kindness in the world waiting to be shared. At the school where she worked, the children had always adored her, but now she began to pour even more of herself into them. She told them stories about courage, forgiveness, and how love was not always returned, but that it was never wasted. Her coworkers noticed the change too. One afternoon, her headmistress called her into the office. "Maria," she said, "we're opening a small weekend program for orphans, children who have no families. I thought of you first. Would you lead it?" For a moment, Maria was silent. Then she nodded, her eyes soft with something that felt like purpose. Yes, she said. I'd love to. The first day of the program, she met a little boy named Arlo. He was quiet, withdrawn, with eyes too old for his age. He reminded her painfully of Daniel when he was young, the same shy smile, the same way of looking at the floor when spoken to. Over time, she learned that Arlo had lost his parents in an accident and had been living in a shelter since. Slowly, he began to open up to her. He would wait by the door every morning, holding a small notebook in which he drew pictures of houses, tiny homes with bright windows and gardens. "That's my house," he would say proudly. "One day I'll live there." Maria would smile and ruffle his hair. "And you will, my dear. You will." In Arlo, she found a kind of healing she hadn't known she needed. She cooked for him, helped him study, and when he fell ill, she stayed by his side all night. Her colleagues began to joke that she had adopted him, and though she laughed it off, deep down, she knew it was true in spirit. One evening, as she walked him home, Arlo looked up and asked, "Do you have a son, Miss Maria?" The question struck her like a blade, but she smiled. "I did," she said softly, "but he doesn't need me anymore." Arlo frowned. "That's not true. Moms are always needed." She smiled again, blinking away tears, and said, "Maybe you're right." That night, as Maria sat in her small apartment, she thought about those words. Moms are always needed, perhaps not by the ones they gave birth to, but by the ones who still needed love. The realization didn't erase her pain, but it changed it. Her love, she understood, did not have to die just because it had been rejected. It could be reborn, reshaped, given to those who would cherish it. As months passed, Maria became known as Miss Maria from the orphan center. Her weekends were filled with laughter, paint-stained hands, and tiny arms wrapping around her waist in hugs that felt like sunlight. She still thought of Daniel sometimes, on his birthday, on quiet nights when the city slept, but she no longer cried. Instead, she prayed for him, not with bitterness but with a mother's unshakable tenderness. She had learned that forgiveness was not a gift for others, it was a balm for one's own soul. 2 years passed before Maria saw Daniel again. Life had taken on a new rhythm, quiet, simple, and full of small joys she had learned to notice. Every morning she walked to the park, greeted the children, and spent her afternoons teaching at the orphan center. Arlo had grown taller, brighter, and more confident under her care. He often told her, "Miss Maria, when I'm older, I'll buy you a big house. You'll never be alone again." She would laugh, pretending to scold him, but his words always touched her deeply. The house that had once broken her heart no longer haunted her dreams. It had become a memory, painful, yes, but distant. She had learned that homes are not built from bricks and walls. They are built from hearts that love you back. One rainy evening, as Maria closed up the classroom, she heard someone calling her name. The voice was hesitant, familiar, almost trembling. She turned, and there he was, Daniel, standing by the gate, drenched in the rain. For a moment, she couldn't move. Time seemed to fold in on itself. The last image she had of him was the door closing in her face. Now he stood there with tears in his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, his voice breaking. "Please, can I talk to you?" Maria's heart twisted painfully, but she nodded. She led him inside, handed him a towel and poured tea. The silence between them was heavy but not hostile, just full of all the things left unsaid. Daniel looked older, tired, and broken in a way she had never seen before. His eyes darted around the small room, lingering on the pictures of children taped to the walls, the drawings, the smiles. "You look different," he murmured. "Happy." Maria smiled faintly. "I am," she said. "It took a while, but I am." He swallowed hard, his hands trembling around the teacup. "Mom, I made a terrible mistake," he whispered. "Lily left me 6 months ago. She said she wanted someone more successful. She took the car, the savings, everything. I didn't even see it coming." Maria's heart ached, not out of sympathy for his loss, but because she saw her younger self in his pain, the same kind of blind trust, the same kind of heartbreak. "I'm sorry, Mom," he continued, tears falling freely now. "I was cruel to you. I forgot who I was. I forgot what you did for me. I just wanted her to be happy, and I lost you in the process." Maria sat quietly, her eyes soft but distant. She wanted to reach out to hold him, but her hands stayed folded in her lap. 4 years. She had dreamt of this moment, of hearing those words, of being needed again. But now that it had come, it didn't feel like she imagined. She was no longer the broken woman who had begged for love. She was whole, calm, steady. "Daniel," she said gently, "you didn't lose me. You just stopped looking for me." He bowed his head, unable to meet her gaze. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said. "Maybe not," she replied softly. "But forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something that frees both people." For a long time, they sat in silence, listening to the rain against the window. Daniel finally looked up, his voice small. "Can I come home, Mom?" The question hung in the air. Maria's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of understanding. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I will always be your mother. You will always have my love. But that house you speak of, it was never my home. My home is here now, with these children, with the life I've built." She smiled sadly. "You're welcome to visit any time. But you have to build your own home now, one that love can survive in." Daniel nodded slowly, tears slipping down his cheeks. He stood and hugged her tightly, the way he had as a little boy. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, "for still being you." She held him for a moment, feeling the weight of years dissolve. "Go live better," she said softly. "That will be your apology." And just like that, the past loosened its grip. After he left, Maria stood by the window, watching him disappear down the rain-soaked street. She didn't feel emptiness this time, only peace. The rain washed against the glass, gentle and rhythmic, and somewhere in the distance, laughter echoed from the orphan center dorms. She turned off the lights, whispering a small prayer, not just for Daniel, but for every heart that had ever been broken by love. She realized that sometimes life takes everything from you so it can teach you how to start over, not as the same person, but as someone wiser, freer, and stronger. That night, she wrote in her journal, a habit she had started to quiet her thoughts. Her final words on the page were simple. Love never disappears. It just finds new places to grow. And as she closed her book, Maria smiled, because she finally understood that the ruins of her old life had become the foundation of a new one.